Ooh, it's cold.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching my Incredibles themed action scene. Since I've already done tutorials for all the props that I use, today I'm gonna do an effects tutorial. So get ready to mash that dislike button. For this build, I used green screen, blue screen, force screen, extra green, fog machine. Nice. Oh, and one Wendy.
Hi!
The most basic way to do this is just to align the footage so that the foreground plate, that is your subject, starts a little bit after the background plate. This will give the effect of the character popping into existence. This technique was pioneered by George Miller. George Miller. Guys, I failed French. Parce que je suis un con américain. The technique was popularized by the show I Dream of Jeannie. Nowadays, it's seen as being very 1960s and campy for some reason, so we can improve upon that effect by adding a crossfade, which is done simply by keyframing the opacity, and now we've got a sort of Back to the Future fading effect. It's a little more believable, but being from an 80s movie, it's still kind of dated. In The Incredibles, the effect is kind of like she's stepping out from behind a curtain. To simulate the curtain effect, I'm going to set a keyframe for the mask path at its final shape. The keyframe is the stopwatch button. Then I'm going to roll back to the starting point and change the shape to its beginning position. This will automatically create a new keyframe, and when we play it back, it'll scroll over the character as if it's a collapsing invisibility shield. You may have to finesse it in between to get it to look right, but again, it's all personal preference. So up until now, all this can be done in Premiere Pro, but Premiere's best version of a mask tool is called a 16-point garbage mat. I think I know why they called it a garbage mat, and it's stone knives and bear skins in comparison. You can do it if that's all that's available to you, but it just constantly save after like every change because it's just gonna want to crash the program. Okay, now that harsh edge isn't really working for me, so I'm going to feather the mask and have the starting keyframe some crazy high number, like, I don't know, 300 or something, and have the ending mask point not quite 0, something like 3. This will make the mask diminishingly fuzzy as it passes over the actor. Like, it'll start out super fuzzy and then get more and more cohesive as it passes over the character. Again, not necessary, but I think it looks better than a harsh line. Okay, so now that's how it was in the movie, but with a live action scene, I think it looks a little bit silly, you know? So let's add a little bit extra by dropping in a Turbulent Displacement effect. Now I just found out this setting is actually in Premiere Pro, but again, it'll crash the thing. It's gonna be a whole stone knives and bearskins. So what we want to do is change the starting keyframe to some crazy huge number. Just make it as squiggly as possible. Add a keyframe for that variable, then go to the very end of the effect and change that number to 0. When you play it back, it should look like an atmospheric lensing effect is collapsing. Because, you know, we all know what that looks like, right? You know, distortions in space-time, light waves affected as they travel too close to a gravity well. Well, Einstein-Rosenberg. I just think it helps sell the effect. But always keep in mind that live-action practical effects will help sell a digital effect. So there's a point in that little clip where she turns invisible, and then I had an actual shot of leaves rustling as if she's running by. Okay, so now we know how to make someone disappear. Let's do an actual invisible person effect. But first, this video is brought to you by my patrons, these people, scrolling over the storyboard. In fact, they're the only reason that this particular video exists at all. It was stalled for a couple months due to budgetary issues, and by now has completely missed the Incredibles release date. Although it kind of makes sense again, because there's a Predator movie out, and that also has an invisible character. Guess I'm gonna have to touch base on that later in the video. But I was only able to finish this video at all because of my patrons. And I really can't thank them enough, because every time I film something and it gets delayed, I feel like I've let down everyone who knows that I'm working on that project until it gets completed. And it's why none of you should lose hope that I'm actually gonna release a project that I said I would release. For all the people who are waiting on the next prop tutorial. So thanks again, patrons. All right, now back to the build. I'm gonna show you a couple different ways of doing the invisible man effect. effect because not everybody has After Effects. So first let's do a version that you can do in Premiere. So we have the shot where the fog rolls in, revealing that there's a gap in the fog where a person is standing. I have absolutely no confirmation that that's how Violet's superpowers work, but I needed that to make the story make sense. So here we go. So I have the actor standing on a blue screen wearing a green morph suit. And then I used a fog machine to simulate refrigerated air. That is when it decided to actually work. That's great. A lot of time was spent airing out this garage to do multiple takes. It actually doesn't really matter that much what colors you use as long as they're vibrant and different from each other. And well lit. I mean, depending on your budget, you could have somebody standing on a green blanket wearing red socks. Although if you want to do the actual Invisible Man effect, where the actor is interacting with the environment and picking things up, moving things around, then they will need to be wearing an evenly lit morph suit. Not necessarily green though. Just saying. So what you want to do is apply whatever keying preset you prefer, because there are a bunch, key out the base layer, then duplicate that preset in the same clip, and key out the subject color as well. However, while you want a good key for your actor, you kind of want what would normally consider to be a bad keying job for the floor that she's standing on. You key out the blue, but not the shadows on the blue. Okay, so now you've got a ghosting effect, and it looks like the fog is reacting with an invisible subject. And that's great for that shot, but I know that because the new Predator movie just came out, a lot of people are probably watching this to figure out how to do that effect, so let's give that one a shot. First we need a background. In this case we're using a random NORAD looking underground tunnel. I had some fog and pre-rendered it so that it would be an actual footage layer. Then I dropped the superhero footage on top, keyed out the green. Oh, and real quick, it turns out you actually don't need the actor to be wearing a solid color suit like in the previous shot. You just need them in front of a background that can be keyed out, which if you are watching for a Predator effect, that way you can get a lot more fill detail, I guess you would call it. Kind of makes me want to make a Predator mask now. Okay, so once you've got those two layers ready, you have to change them by going into pre-compose and uncheck leave all attributes and check move all attributes to the new composition. Then add a displacement map preset to the background layer and change the target from that layer to the foreground layer. Then shut off the foreground layer, otherwise you're not gonna be able to see it. To get the distortion light effect, you have to change both the vertical and the horizontal displacement to luminance and adjust the displacement amount however you see fit. I found 63 and 5 to work best, at least for this particular shot. It'll change depending on the background that you're using. The greater the number, the more detail it'll show, but after a certain point, it kind of looks weird, you know? Also, the background plate is a huge factor. I found that the more complex the background plate is, the cooler the displacement effect will look. To get your character to reappear, you would have wanted to duplicate your footage before you pre-composed it and just not pre-compose the duplications. You set the opacity on those to 0 and then slowly step it back up to 100, which will give the shot this cool filling in the outline effect when your character reappears. Almost like it's a liquid filling up a glass. Alright, that's the invisible effects. We're gonna end it here because the force field stuff and everything else that went into this project is like a year of content and I really need to build something. Hey, thanks for watching everyone. I know that this video was kind of out of character for me and I promise the next one will be a prop. I know this is gonna sound hard to believe, but it's actually infinitely easier for me to make a prop tutorial than it is for me to make a video with an actual narrative structure, you know, like a story. Because with a prop, I just turn the camera on and work, you know? And I'm trying to never let that slip my mind because there's a test film in the next tutorial and it only needs to be 3 shots. Oh, but wouldn't it look great if there was a 4th shot with a creature in it? Yeah. Who's gonna build that? Who's gonna play the creature? But I do honestly believe that a knowledge of effects, both practical and visual, can be helpful to prop makers. Because if you know what the prop has to do, then you can focus your time and energy on that aspect of the prop and not waste it on another aspect that isn't even gonna be seen by the camera. But yeah, let me know, how many of you build props just for your hobby and how many of you build props for filmmaking purposes? And both. Just tell me why you make props other than it's awesome. All right, see you later. Jake out. Hey, you wanna know how I did the flying effect? Lazy Susans.